Lieutenant Dambanjai said both Korosis's murder and the killing of soldiers on November 11 were ordered by former dictator Yahya Jammeh. U.S. President Donald Trump met North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Hanoi today for a summit to discuss the nuclearization of Korean Peninsula and lifting of sanctions on Pyongyang. Muhammadu Buhari wins Nigerian election with 56% of the votes, but the opposition rejects outcomes of the votes. These are the headlines, more coming on your way on The World Today. It's midnight in Istanbul, 1 p.m. in Washington State, 2100 GMT here in the Gambia. You're watching The World Today Evening Bulletin. We now take a look at our first story. Informers to former President Jammeh cost me my job, accusing me of a coup attempt and campaigning for the United Democratic Party, says former Second Lieutenant of the Gambia National Army, Dambanjai. Testifying as the 23rd witness before the Truth Commission probing the human rights violations of the former dictator Yahya Jammeh, Dambanjai said Gambia's former finance minister Usman Korosise was killed at the Kololi residence of former junta Yankuba Toure. Saja Sambo has more.
Before the TRRC commissioners for the first time, the former defense ministry of the Gambia, Second Lieutenant Dambanjai, said his dismissal from the force came when informers reported him told the former President Yahya Jammeh that he was secretly campaigning for APRC fiercest rival UDP and at the same time planning to overthrow the APRC government through the barrel of the gun. Dambanjai said that his dismissal was cut short when General Lantombon Tamba called him, informing him of reinstating him back to the services, a directive from Yahya Jammeh as Director of Admin and Logistics.
We were asked as officers to give our wives our camouflage trousers and be issued with T-shirts of APRC and Yahya Jammeh for campaigning.
So the idea was the officers' wives would wear camouflage pants and Yahya Jammeh T-shirts and go out on campaign.
For the campaign. I objected to that my wife is not going to do that. I'm not a politician. If I am to support any member, it's through the vote, not to go and campaign for anybody. Other officers did.
And did anything happen to you after that?
Yes. Then they campaigned. I can remember just at the end of the campaign, they were giving money. They came because the headquarters was Mile 7. Most of the officers were staying at Mile 7. I can remember some women telling my wife, we've been giving money by Jammeh, but you're not a part of it. But what happened to me, after the results, there were the victory celebrations. It usually be on Saturday, Sunday. Then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I was going to office. And at some point around 11, then Babakar Jatta was the commandant of the Gambian forces. He called me into his office. I went in. And as soon as I stepped in, he started crying. I was worried. I said, why? Why is this crying? Sir, what's it? He cried for about 2-3 minutes. Then he just bowed his head and handed me a letter. I opened it and see you are discharged with immediate effects. All benefits will be paid. That is, my service will be terminated.
And what happened after that?
Well, it was Friday. By Monday, I came hand over all my military kits, that's the kitting, went to the military police, signed, and when I signed that I've handed over everything, then they served me my letter of discharge. And there, I can still remember, Babu Gajata was so worried and said some people went to tell President Jammeh that I was campaigning for UDP. Even there was a place where they said I was planning a coup d'etat. I don't know what one-man coup d'etat, how can one man do that?
The former soldier, Dembanjai, further stated that upon reinstatement, he was sent to represent the Gambia Armed Forces in Liberia for a UN observer mission in 2008. 11 months later, whilst in Liberia, Sheikh Omar Cham, a friend, called him, informing him that he's been dismissed alongside Lantombon Tamba and others who were arrested accused of a coup attempt.
I got a call from one Sheikh Omar Cham, he is a friend, that we just hearing over the radio that you've been dismissed with Lantombon Tamba and others. I said, yeah. I said, yeah. And I go, okay. No reason given. He said, no. I continued my mission. Then some week or so after, I heard that Lantombong and others were arrested and charged for coup d'etat. Then friends and family members started calling me. Don't come. If you come, you will be arrested.
The former second lieutenant concluded by telling the commissioner that when his mission in Liberia ended, he flies back home to report to command at the Yundum barracks. Few days later, he received a call from the camp that he is being dismissed from the force and that the army belongings will be collected at his house. He said his services were ceased without termination from 2009 to 2017 before he could retire. Sittings will continue tomorrow at the TRRC at the usual time, 10 a.m. local time. For the news, I am Sajo Sambu.
Have pledged $2.6 billion to provide urgently needed support to millions of Yemeni people facing an overwhelming humanitarian calamity, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said. Speaking on the sidelines of a pledging conference in Geneva, Mr. Guterres welcomed the generosity of member states who had pledged 30% more than last year. Here is an insert.
The donors have pledged 30% more than last year to help address the dramatic humanitarian situation in Yemen. From $2 billion in the pledging conference of 2018 to $2.6 billion in the pledging conference of 2019. Several countries have naturally increased their contributions, but I think it is fair to say that the two most relevant elements in this increase came from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. We had an important moment in Stockholm in which it was possible to agree on a ceasefire in Odeid and a number of other aspects. We know that there is a hope for the end of the conflict, but we know that we are also facing many obstacles in the implementation of the Stockholm Agreement. We are not disregarding the war that exists and the fact that a number of countries, not only the ones that you mentioned, a number of countries have had a direct impact on that war. And obviously what we want is to end the war and to end all the consequences of the war. The people that are killed, the people that suffer, all other kinds of impacts. Independently of that, today we had a pledging conference to address humanitarian needs. Tens of thousands of people have been killed or injured since the conflict escalated, many of them civilians. And many more have died from preventable diseases exacerbated by malnutrition. 20 million people cannot reliably feed themselves or their families, and almost 10 million are just one step away from famine. Children did not start the war in Yemen, but they are paying the highest price. Some 360,000 children are suffering from severe acute malnutrition, fighting for their lives every day. And one credible report put the number of children under 5 who have died of starvation at more than 80,000.
Conference co-host Sweden's Foreign Minister Margaret Wallström described similarly dire situation in a country which was already one of the poorest in the world before violence cut desperately needed imports of food, fuel and medicine. She said over 240,000 people are in Category 5, meaning that they are facing starvation. Listen to her in this insert.
Face the shocking fact that 240,000 people, according to the new published IPC report, are in Category 5, meaning that they are facing starvation. Some 10 million people don't know where to find their next meal. And as so often is the case, women and girls find themselves in a particularly vulnerable situation, as you've already heard the Secretary General mention. Women eat last and least.
A top UN humanitarian official said the UN welcomes all efforts to ease the suffering of people stranded at Syria's rock band. However, these efforts need to ensure that any return or relocation is voluntary, safe, dignified and well-informed. Addressing the Security Council, Rina Galani, Director for Operations and Advocacy for the Office for the Coordination of Human Rights Affairs, said the UN had not been involved in the opening of humanitarian corridors from the makeshift settlement. Let's take a look at this insert.
The UN welcomes all efforts to ease the suffering of people stranded at Rukban and to identify durable solutions. These efforts, however, need to ensure that any return or relocation is voluntary, safe, dignified and well-informed, and abides by core protection standards in line with international humanitarian and human rights law. Dialogue is ongoing with the communities in Rukban, the Russian Federation, the Syrian authorities, and others to ensure that this will be the case in any relocation process. Extremely harsh conditions are reported along the route north, including cold temperatures and a lack of food, water, shelter, and health services. At least 75 people, 2/3 of them children under the age of 1, have died since December 2018, either while in transit or shortly after arriving in the El Hol camp, mostly due to exposure and a lack of access to health care. I reiterate today that the risk of military escalation and of potentially catastrophic humanitarian consequences persist. It is therefore critical to sustain and fully implement the Russian-Turkey Agreement of 17 September 2018.
U.S. President Donald Trump met North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Hanoi today for a summit to discuss denuclearization of Korean Peninsula and lifting of sanctions on Pyongyang. According to Seoul-based Arirang TV, Trump reached the Metropole Hotel at around 6:15 p.m. local time, followed by Kim, who reached a few minutes later. The two leaders are scheduled to have a one-on-one meeting for 20 minutes, followed by a social dinner which will be joined by top aides, the Arirang reported. Before Trump and Kim departed for a private chat, the U.S. president told reporters he shares a great relationship with Kim. This summit will be very successful, possibly even greater than first summit, Trump said, referring to the historic summit held in Singapore last June. I am satisfied with how things had gone so far, he said when asked about the pace of progress towards denuclearization. The U.S. president said he thought North Korea has tremendous economic potential. There has been a lot of progress in the relationship between the U.S. and North Korea, he added. Kim, who spoke after Trump, said a lot of obstacles had to be overcome for the summit to take place, but he is confident there will be a good result. Much time and consideration was needed for a satisfying result, Arirang quoted the North Korean leader. The two leaders will be holding a news conference tomorrow. Reporting for iAfrica TV, I am Fatoumata Jaju. Coming up after the break, the House Committee on Oversight and Reform voted in favor of issuing subpoenas against U.S. President Donald Trump's administration for documents related to the president's child separation policy. Fear over electoral rigging rocks Zimbabwe as the country.
Yesterday, after listening to Prime Minister May's assessment of the state of the negotiations,
Welcome back. We remind you that you're watching the World Today Evening Bulletin. Let's now take a look at the remaining stories. The House Committee on Oversight and Reform voted in favor of issuing subpoenas against U.S. President Donald Trump's administration for documents related to the president's child separation policy. The vote by a margin of 25 to 11 is the first subpoena to be issued since Democrats gained majority control over the House of Representatives at the beginning of the year.
Look, even if you believe people entered our country illegally, even if you believe they have no valid asylum claims in their own country, even if you believe immigration should be halted entirely, we all should be able to agree that in the United States of America, we will not intentionally separate children from their parents. We will not do that. We are better than that.
The vote by a margin of 25 to 11 is the first subpoena to be issued since Democrats gained majority control over the House of Representatives at the beginning of the year. Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings said it was the same request made 7 months ago for information relating to the policy. I believe it is a true national emergency when our own government rips vulnerable children, toddlers and even infants from the arms of their mothers and fathers with no plan to reunite them. That is government-sponsored child abuse. It is our job to step in and protect those children, Cummings said. While all Democrats on the committee voted in favor, 2 Republicans, Justin Amash and Chip Roy, joined in to make it a bipartisan effort. The committee is seeking details on the children that were separated, such as their age, gender, country or origin, and location. Around 2,600 children had been detained under the country's zero-tolerance policy, which called for criminal prosecution for any adults found trying to illegally enter the U.S. Last month, the Department of Health and Human Services, HSS, said there were thousands more children that separated from their families by the administration prior to the policy. After a lawsuit was filed on behalf of separated families, a federal court ordered the reunification of the families. Trump ended the zero-tolerance policy with an executive order in June 2018. However, there was no order to reunify any families that had been separated prior to the policy. For iAfrica TV News, I am Fatmata Jaju. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has been declared the winner of the country's election after results showed that he claimed 56% of the votes. With ballots from all 36 states counted, Buhari's All Progressive Congress APS gained 15.2 million votes compared with 11.3 million for Atiku Abubakar's People's Democratic Party. The election turnout was 35.6%, the Electoral Commission said, which compared with 44% in 2015 presidential elections. Buhari won in 19 states, including the 2 most populous, Lagos and Kano, while Abubakar was victorious in 17. To win in the first round, the victor must get at least a quarter of the votes in 2/3 of the states, plus an overall majority, and Buhari appeared to have won enough to avoid a runoff. But the opposition People's Democratic Party, PDP, rejected the results and threatened to take legal action, saying that the ruling All Progressive Congress had manipulated the votes. The election was delayed at the last minute by a week, and since it was held, 47 people have been killed. UN political chief Rosemary DiCarlo said much more remains to be done to address the extremely urgent needs of the Venezuelan people, adding that delivery of assistance is guided by the principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence, and must be free from political objectives and delivered on the basis of need. Addressing the Security Council, DiCarlo said Venezuela had witnessed an alarming escalation of tensions recently, which is worrisome and needs urgent intervention. Here is an insert.
Much more remains to be done to address the extremely urgent needs of the Venezuelan people. The UN is ready to continue expanding these efforts. We will continue to act in accordance with humanitarian principles, working with Venezuelan institutions to assist people in need.
For his part, the United States Special Representative for Venezuela, Elliot Abrams, said the Maduro regime refused to allow humanitarian aid into the country, which showed its true nature. He said armed gangs, thugs, and criminals released from prisons were mobilized to control the border and accused them of burning the assistance. Here is Mr. Abrams in this insert.
The cure to this misery and tyranny is a free, fair, and transparent election that embraces all sectors of society and all political parties. That of course includes Chavistas, whose party has been usurped, much like the country itself, by Maduro. We believe that both Guaido supporters and Chavistas can rebuild their country together, can construct a newly prosperous and democratic Venezuela. Now is the time to strengthen our commitment to the brave Venezuelan people. We call on the members of the Security Council to join us in meeting the growing needs in Venezuela and the region. We call on member states to consider what resources and tools they have to contribute to Venezuelan democracy and to pressure the illegitimate Maduro regime to peacefully step down. We ask that others join us in sanctioning those who've been involved in the violence over the last weekend and who are fattened by the spoils of the Maduro regime's corruption.
Well, viewers, that's all we have for you on the World Today Evening Bulletin. For more on these and other stories, log on to our website on iAfrica.tv. I am Fatmata Jaju. Bye for now. Fear over electoral rigging rocks